View from the Gutters, Episode 16. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss Marvels, and to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip ahead to 4351. Alright, welcome to View from the Gutters, episode 16.
It's 16.
It is 16.
It's
sweet 16.
It's sweet 16. Is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And,
So wait, yeah, I don't know.
and we have all six of us.
We have
Yes.
6 for 16.
We have a sixth thumb.
Yeah,
A sextet.
There you go. Perfect.
this is,
Got it.
yeah. We're old enough to drive now in
We
some states.
are.
Well, the podcast is old enough to drive.
Yeah, well, I'm not still old
Well,
enough to
no,
drive
no.
yet.
We have 16 episodes. That's not equivalent to 16 here.
I don't know. It
On
kind of
this
felt like
show?
16
Yeah.
It
years.
can, however,
yeah.
get married to Mexico or something. No, that would have been last. We should have mentioned that last episode was its quinceañera.
Whoops.
Yeah, you really dropped the ball on that,
I
Joe.
get,
Whoops.
I'm sorry. I apologize to the Hispanic community.
Now looking back.
No, we're not going to do that.
Oh. Alright, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Eddy Chard.
I'm Joe Preti.
Brant, Eddy.
Cade Reynolds.
Tobiah Panshin.
And Matt McGinnis.
Alright. And,
Full crew.
yeah. Big
Tobiah
crew.
was supposed to introduce himself after. I was trying to keep some semblance of how we introduce ourselves.
We
Yeah.
introduce ourselves in the order that we're sitting. And
Yeah,
we're not
that's
sitting
how
in our
I do
normal
it.
chairs today.
Oh, I don't. Fuck that noise. I'm
Yeah.
introducing myself second.
Yeah, I saw you do that. It was very rude of you.
Yeah.
I meant
I think
nothing.
you should
He's
apologize to
jump-
the listeners.
I
And
apologize
Brant.
to the listeners and Brant, but I take back the ones to the listeners because really,
What listeners?
whatever. I know there's a few people that are listening.
There are a few.
I guilt people into listening. I have no shame.
I haven't tried to get anyone to listen to it yet.
I gave a hobo a blowjob the other day so he would listen.
That's
How was
good.
he
That's a good
downloading
deal.
anything from iTunes?
Fuck.
He has an
Think about
iPhone.
that.
He
All
has
the
an
hobos
iPhone
have
5.
computers now.
Yeah,
Actually.
And
And
cell
up-to-date
phones.
data plan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
they totally do. This
Actually,
is
they
Olympia.
use the Wi-Fi.
It actually may not have been a hobo. It may have been an Evergreen student.
Yeah,
I'm
you
not
never
sure.
know.
What's the difference?
He had an iPhone.
Insert-
So probably an Evergreen.
Insert rim shot and local reference here.
Yeah.
Welcome
Well,
to
since-
Olympia.
Since the only fucking people listening to us, I'm pretty sure, are in Olympia.
Hey, there's one guy in Hoboken who's just like,
Ah.
I don't get that
I
right.
don't
Hoboken.
understand.
Evergreen.
Hoboken. Welcome, Hoboken, to the podcast.
Actually-
You're not being carried by your local station.
There's
So
a Hampshire
welcome.
student somewhere that's raging because you're like, that joke should have been about me.
It's true.
Damn it.
It's true. It's true.
All right, what did we read this week?
We read Marvels.
We did read Marvels.
Who
It's
wrote
Cade's book,
and
right?
illustrated Marvel?
It was.
So it's Kurt Busiek
Busiek.
and Alex Ross. This is Alex Ross' first big comics project, isn't it? Or is it his first big painting project for a comic book?
For interior art, I think so.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
did covers. I
He
believe.
did
Okay,
lots of covers.
so-
He did lots of design work.
Yeah, because he
Um,
helped what's his face with Earth X. I can never remember.
Earth X came out after this, didn't it?
Yeah.
Did
Yeah,
it?
I'm pretty
But
sure.
but that was still design work.
Yeah,
for
I
him,
mean,
so
he did the character designs.
definitely was a design guy for a lot of stuff. Yeah, I think you're right about that, though, that this is his first interior.
And
This is-
being that it was his first kind of big project, I'm surprised to say I think it's probably some of my favorite stuff. that he did.
Hands down, hands
Yeah.
down.
Absolutely.
It's not really what I was expecting, but
Yeah.
I did. I really loved it. I usually feel like his stuff is too
Constrained
Static.
on the page.
static. I think was the
Yeah.
word that we used last
Yeah.
podcast when we talked
Mm.
about it. It just, I mean, you see the stuff and it's like prints you want to put on your wall, but there's
Mhm.
not really much movement in it. Whereas I felt like there's a lot more.
I feel like in Kingdom Come, there's lots of panels of guys standing around. There's a lot of action sequences in Kingdom Come, but it doesn't feel anywhere near as dynamic, I think, as this,
No.
because I think he's playing with camera angle more in
Oh,
this.
good. We're gonna fight.
I think he's playing with camera angle more in this, where
Hooray!
he's lower to the ground because he's trying to set up from a photographer's standpoint. There's lots of good emulating with that scene where he's emulating the cover that Giant Man is on, where he's down below, and you get a much more cinematic
That's one of my
approach.
favorite panels in the whole book.
I think this definitely has a very cinematic feel, whether or not Kingdom Come doesn't have one, because I think there's some really epic cinematic panels in Kingdom Come, but I think this book has such a cinematic feel that it really stands out in my mind of some of the best work from Alex Ross I've ever seen.
I have a question for you guys.
Real quick before you do that, this is from 1993, so it's definitely before Earth X and Kingdom Come.
Yeah, I read this when it came out originally. I had the original issues, and it was the first book of its kind. It was the first, I guess, more literary comic I had read. And it blew my fucking 16-year-old mind out of the back of my skull. Like, it was like nothing I'd ever read, and I devoured it, and I read it over and over and over again. And it's cool, when they came out, they had these cardboard covers that had the cover on them, and then the Marvel's title was on a clear acetate page, so you could lift it up and just see the cover painting, like, unhindered by anything. And it was a great way to market it.
So what were you saying, Cade?
Oh, well, actually, Joe just answered, his portion of my question. But the question was to everybody, whose first time was this reading this book?
It was my first time reading this book. I'd never read this before.
It was my first time as well. I hadn't read it.
I've read it before.
Yeah, I read it about 4 years ago. Right after I read Kingdom Come. So I read them back to back. Which really colored my reading of Marvel.
See, yeah, I didn't read Kingdom Come until I got back into comics when I was in my late 20s, which really... This is always what's... I think they do completely separate things, though. Like, this is kind of this is as far away from Kingdom Come as you can get.
I think they do a similar thing, but they just do it in a different way, I feel like. I think they definitely are both, like, a dissection of superheroes, but they go about it in a very different way. Like,
well, they're both deconstructive.
Yeah.
Well,
but they're completely different kinds of deconstruction.
Well, I think they also illustrate the tension between the two universes, right?
Mm-hmm.
The iconography of DC being much more kind of
iconic.
Well, mythic.
Yeah.
In this certain sense, whereas the flavor of Marvel has always been a little bit more real, and that's always been one of the parallels drawn between the two. And I think they serve as that tool for both of those universes in that way.
I do think it's interesting how mythic they make the figures out in this book too, though. He definitely is like drawing on a lot of your human looking at God's kind of appeal to it, and looking at it through a human standpoint. You know, they're being idolized. They're on the cover of 16 magazine. There's statues being made out of them at fancy art shows and stuff. So.
See, I kind of had the exact opposite reaction to it, in that by the very necessity of the style in which Ross is drawing, he is humanizing these characters. They're drawn like real people wearing costumes rather than painted on super beings that we normally see.
And I agree with that. I think this is like what really gets me every time about this is how well Kurt Busiek is able to kind of not tell the story of the Marvels, but tell it through this rather ordinary guy that really just has a really good eye and a really good mind for like journalism. You know, it's really some of my favorite moments of the book are his kind of interactions with Peter Parker, where Peter Parker's like, I just need money, I'm just getting paid, and he's kind of like, punk.
Mm-hmm. Well, and J. Jonah Jameson before that, like
right?
J. Jonah's there. At
the evolution of.
I really enjoyed all of the interactions that the main character was it Phil?
Yeah, Phil Sheldon.
Phil Sheldon has with all of the Marvels. You know, like he's there at the beginning, and he's kind of at all these iconic places. He's in World War II. He sees the Defenders at that point, right? When they're attacking.
That's the
like he's in that unit. He sees that. He sees the mutant riots firsthand. Like he's a really good lens to look through. And I was talking to Matt a little bit about this before, but one of the things that really disconnected me from the story the first time was these original stories were told so quickly, like that the Human Torch origin and those Defenders, they were told in an era where origin stories took 2 panels and there wasn't as much exposition. So it's an interesting way to look at those origins and those stories. But I kind of feel cheated in a way because it's just a story about a story that I want to read more about.
Yeah, it felt like a well-packaged copy of something that wasn't... Like, it didn't expand on really that much. It just kind of, like I said, kind of repackaged it, which I felt a little let down about. Because having not read it yet, I'd heard so many good things from so many people about it, and it was something that maybe I overhyped. That, I mean, while I'm not saying I didn't like it, it was one thing that it felt like like a history lesson almost in a lot of ways.
Well, I think,
which isn't bad. But,
yeah.
it did kind of leave me wanting more, which...
I felt that it was a very realistic look, though, at his story rather than the story of the universe. I mean, when you get to the end, you have this feeling where, you know, his final book is the book that you're holding. This is his story, literally.
I actually like that.
It's also similar. It reminds me in a way of like year one. Toby brought up year one earlier. We were talking about it
We've talked repeatedly about how I haven't read year one. Well, I finally sat down tonight and I read year one.
Yeah, so we were talking about it earlier, and year one to me it's a Batman story, but that story is so much more about Gordon than it is about Batman. And this one is like, this is a story about the Marvels, but in reality, Cade's right. It's like so much more a story about Phil Sheldon, and it is a really interesting story about a character in the Marvel universe that has no powers. Like, I really like that element.
Yeah.
It's what set it apart from Kingdom Come for me. But it also is what draws a lot of similarities to Kingdom Come, because there is another Norman in Kingdom Come, is the guy without powers in that one, right?
Yeah.
And the Spectre is kind of showing him.
I feel like they have... I mean, I guess they have kind of a similar path. I think me and Toby had spoken about this.
I read Marvels on Joe's couch a week ago, and we talked about it a little bit afterwards. And I'm hesitant to give my point yet, because I had, I think, a very different reaction to this than a lot of people did, and I feel like it's going to kick off a little bit of a shitstorm, because I had an incredibly viscerally negative reaction to this story.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy reading it, I enjoy looking at it, and I like Phil Sheldon's story, but this definitely is not one of my favorite stories. Like, I don't particularly love it.
Well, it took me a while, and I had to sit down for a week and unpack what it is, and there's two stories here. There's the story of the Marvels that were being told by Phil Sheldon or through him, and then there is also the story of Phil Sheldon.
Right.
And the Marvel story I liked. I thought it was incredibly real. It gives you an insight and an emotional impact that you normally don't get in superhero comics. It's not my favorite thing, but it's incredibly well done. It's incredibly interesting. It's something I think everybody should check out at least once. There were a few points that kind of fell down on me, partially because of UCX art, where it became too real. There's one specific
Ross's
panel.
art.
Ross's art. There's one panel specifically with Galactus where he's kind of crouching, and it looks very, very obviously like a guy wearing a suit that Ross has drawn.
Yeah.
You know, from a reference photo or from somebody posing for him. It looks too real. It doesn't look like this giant god of the stars. It looks like just some dude wearing a Halloween costume.
Yeah.
So it fell down for me in a couple points on that angle, but in general, I like the story. Phil Sheldon as a character, I really hated and had an incredibly negative reaction to. He bothers me on an existential level.
Why?
Well, that was the even harder thing for me to figure out, and I actually have a slightly lengthy quote that I'd like to read, if I may be allowed, that explains that.
Yeah,
so
the court will allow that.
Thank you.
We'll hear your argument.
So, full disclosure, my parents are both award-winning science fiction writers. One of the things that they wrote about 25 years ago was a history of science fiction called The World Beyond the Hill. Won the Hugo Award that year for, I guess, criticism. Very, very well received. And one of the major elements of that book is talking about the difference between what my father called the village and then the world beyond the hill. And the villages are normal, mundane reality where we have an idea of how things work. And then the world beyond the hill is this other transcendent world where different and strange things can be allowed to happen. And I want to read a few quotes from that book. It will take me about a minute. So, he talks about science fiction, but I want you to think about comic books in general and superheroes specifically as I read this. Science fiction is a literature of the mythic imagination. In science fiction stories, spaceships and time machines carry us outside ourselves, outside our world, outside everything we know, to distant realms that none of us have ever seen, to the future and outer space. In science fiction, we encounter unknown powers, alien beings, and worlds of wonder where things become possible that are presently impossible to us. These marvels are the very essence of science fiction. They are the source of science fiction's fascination and appeal. Without them, science fiction would be just like everything else. Normal, known, ordinary, and commonplace. As it is, science fiction is irrational, extraordinary, elusive, wonderful, never completely to be known. This quality of the unknown, the marvelous, and the wonderful we may call transcendence. No matter how rational and fact-based science fiction has attempted to be, the marvelous has been a constant element as well. The acknowledgement of transcendence was present from the moment that science fiction existed as a distinct literary form. Transcendence, by definition, consists of things which not only do not exist in our familiar world, but are different in kind from anything we see around us. Things which are not bound by the limitations that bind us. To claim in a story that transcendence is visibly present in our local world, which we may call the village, would violate our sense of plausibility. We know things just aren't that way here. It's possible to bring transcendence into the village only by limiting its visibility and influence, by keeping it in dark corners, restricting its powers, and having it depart before the world at large notices it is there. In the village, our knowledge of what is limits our acceptance of the marvelous. But in distant places where even ordinary things are different than they are around here, it is easy to believe that more radical difference will be found as well. In the world beyond the hill, transcendent power can display itself everywhere. There are superior beings to be encountered, and we may undergo experiences that village knowledge cannot encompass. Mundane fiction is incompletely mythic because the only things it sees as possible are those which exist or which have existed. As strongly as it may reinforce our sense of plausible possibility, at best it can only present larger-than-life characters and situations that remind us of the existence of transcendence without actually daring to be transcendent. Science fiction has been effective myth for our time because it respects both the actual and the transcendent. It takes into account what we know and what we don't, and then looks beyond the here and now to thrill and inspire us of dreams of what might be. And when I read this passage, what I'm thinking is, I look at Phil Sheldon as someone who has peeked over the edge of the village into the world beyond the hill. He sees a greater world, and he is frightened by it. He tries to understand it and to put it within the limitations of the village in terms of things that he can understand. And when he realizes that that isn't possible, he decides that is not something that he wants anything to do with, and he decides to step away and ignore it from then on.
Well, I don't think he ever wants to ignore it. I think it's just something that he's afraid of. I mean, several times throughout the book, it's something that he sees and is unsure of how to react to. Like the first time that Namor attacks, and he thought that after they were in World War II together, and he's like, well, I thought Namor was one of our boys. Like, it's something that he can't understand. Yeah. It confuses him. It scares him. Well, as a man who wants to raise a family, like, it kind of terrifies him that there are things outside of his control.
It does, but I feel like he's trying to understand it throughout the comic, and at the end, he basically, hands off the reins to his assistant and says, I'm done with this. I can't be a part of this world anymore. And to me, that feels like a rejection of the offer of transcendence and higher knowledge that superhero stories present us.
And I think, I've been thinking, because we had this conversation a week ago, and I've been also thinking about it. And I mean, like, clearly I can't disagree with how you feel about something, right? Like, you totally have that right. But I look at Phil Sheldon and I see somebody who wanted to go to the front in Europe to report on the war. He lost an eye. At the end, he's not running from understanding. He has his understanding. And he realizes that his understanding is not what the people need. It's not what he wants to convey. He wants somebody else who's taking that journey to take it. He's taken his. He's done.
Well, also his understanding, in a way, is that he doesn't understand.
That's how I am. I mean,
I look at him and I see somebody who has been walking along the road, and he sees the Buddha sitting under the tree, and the Buddha says, "Come with me, and I will show you the true face of reality. I will show you transcendence and enlightenment." And he goes, "That sounds creepy."
Well, but they're not offering him anything positive.
No, see,
nothing positive comes from
are.
Galactus. I mean, nothing positive comes from a Galactus attack on the city. The first thing that he sees with the with the Human Torch breaking out is he sees the Human Torch running through the city and lighting things on fire, and he sees the destruction between the battle of Namor and the Human Torch, and he's afraid. It's not something that he can control, and it's not something that he wants around him.
I don't agree with that, actually. If anything, my understanding of this character is that actually he does find it interesting. He's not afraid like the other ones are. He runs to it. He wants to show it. He is marveled by it. Right? That's why he calls them marvels. Is that he's actually entranced by this notion of these things. He is looking over, if we're going to use that metaphor, he's looking into these other place, and he's seeing these beings who are greater than. And the thing that the thing that I read differently than you, Tobiah, is that he sees Peter Parker fail to save a normal woman. And not only that, that woman's death is completely relegated to the 10th page. It has no value. And I think in that moment, he realizes two things in parallel. Those beings that are transcendent are not. They are mortal and they are fallible. Peter Parker, he basically sees that Spider-Man isn't a god or a demigod or a hero in the absolute sense. He's a guy doing something, and he fails. And they will fail. And then he realizes that is something that he's seen his entire life. Yes, they are spectacular. They do fantastic things. But he had this naive notion that they will always save the day. They will always protect innocence. And when he checks that, he realizes that's not true. And that's where he decides that he's done. He realizes that the cycle will perpetuate. Everybody's fascinated by it, like People magazine and like watching the paparazzi type of thing. People are always going to basically get all salivated over it. And he realizes that people are still going to get hurt. And he's seen it, and he realizes that it's not as beautiful and ephemeral. It's actually much darker and gritty. And he's done. He's old. He's missed a lot of his life because he chose to chase them. And he's done. And he's going to instead revel in the fact that there is something to be celebrated in normalcy.
And I guess I feel like that's it's a failure in a sense. It's that he reaches the point where he is close to seeing a piece of higher knowledge, but he mistakes the marvels as being the transcendence or the higher knowledge that he's trying to get at, rather than something which represents it or which is iconic of it. And it's like the old religious argument against idolatry, that you mistake the symbol for the message, that he is mistaking the Marvel characters for the message that they represent, and when he sees them as fallible, he believes that the message is false.
See, I don't think he does believe the message is false.
I don't think so either.
There's no point where he says, well, I'm throwing in my towel, fuck it. The world can burn. I mean, that's not at all. I get a much more altruistic sense from it. Because, kind of like we said, the book that you hold in your hand is his work. I mean, it's not like he said, fuck it, I don't want to do this. He's saying, I finally figured out what it is that I want, and it wasn't what I thought I wanted, and that's the higher knowledge that he reaches, is a more complete picture, an understanding of the picture.
I also want to touch back on what Brant was saying too, is I think that he always had that fear though that they were fallible. There's a good passage in the Marvels, in the X-Men chapter, where his kids are playing, they're pretending to be Marvels, and he has this thought, like, maybe they shouldn't, idealize them as much. Like, maybe they shouldn't look up to them as much as they do. I think that's the kind of first glimpse you get of him, doubting. I think you just get glimpses of him doubting Marvels throughout the whole book. I think when he sees the point I brought up earlier, when Namor attacks again after they were in World War II, he's like, I thought he was one of our boys. There's just this doubt about the superheroes being as good as he thought they were always. I think there's just these little, pieces of doubt in his mind.
I agree. I think he has these individual moments where he's kind of like, that seems kind of weird, but it never fully turns into an absolute okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Until he sees the whole Gwen Stacy thing.
Yeah, I guess my reaction was very particular to who I am and the upbringing I have, and I understand why the rest of you don't necessarily share it.
Well, I think it speaks volumes about the character of Phil Sheldon that we're able to pull all this shit out of his motivation. I mean, we've gotten 3 what seems like distinctly different takes on what his motivation is, just from a few panels at the end of this book.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to, you know, I think that that's the mark of a quality work. I think you should be able to apply different interpretations to it. And I think this, as far as some of the things we kind of argue about, I think that's totally, except it's totally open to interpretation. You can totally project yourself into that and be like, this is what I get out of that. You know?
I think that's what makes the work more literary than a work that is like, oh, what is the moral of this story? Superman punched a big robot. Like that. I mean, like sometimes there just isn't more to glean from a comic book. And in this case, I think there's a lot to dig out of this. There's a lot of things you can choose to look at. And I think that it says a lot about when he was writing it in the 90s, in a time where superheroes were going in the direction that is like, you know, there isn't a lot. Sometimes there wasn't a lot to glean from those 90s stories. Like sometimes there were. Like there's great stories that came out of the 90s, obviously. Marvel's is one of them. But
I think that this is an excellent counterpoint to the comic that we read last week, Cosmic Odyssey, which was very much the opposite of that. It was the comic where Superman punches a robot. Right. And that's really cool.
It's awesome.
But just to reiterate, this is a good story. I do recommend that you read it for yourself if you haven't already. Just, you know, because that there is a lot of depth there, and even though I found the seed of something that I really didn't like, I like the fact that it made me think about that and really unpack those feelings and figure out why I was feeling the way that I was feeling.
Yeah, I feel the mark of a truly good story, a well-crafted story, is that it makes you look inward.
Absolutely.
And it as we kind of touched on already, that it's able to have the six of us here be able to sit down and have such an in-depth conversation and have different points of view and still be able to respect each other's point of view.
Absolutely.
If we all had the same thoughts, it'd be a very boring podcast.
Exactly.
I liked it. It was great.
Well, some episodes are like that. That's why we got the rail so often. It's because it's like, we kind of all enjoyed it. It was fun.
But yeah, while I
Hush. None of that.
But I mean, it wasn't my favorite story either, but at the same time, it did make me think a lot. And for that, I'm grateful.
Yeah.
I think that this book is good for a couple different people. I think it's really good for experienced Marvel readers who really just are voracious readers of that universe. Who just want everything that they can get Marvel. They should obviously read this. This is a huge book in the Marvel universe, and I think it's really good. I also think that this is a great book for fans of literary comics like Sandman or some of the Vertigo stuff that don't necessarily enjoy a superhero book. Like this might be something that they could dig into and say, oh, there's more to superheroes than just the Superman punches a robot. But this book definitely isn't for everyone, and I hesitate to recommend this book to a lot of people just because I feel like you should kind of be an experienced comic reader before you read it. I don't think I would ever hand this to anyone who's like, I've never read a comic before.
Well, no, I mean, the work inherently requires that you know what happened in the Marvel Universe to really appreciate what's been going on.
I do have to say that there is one moment that I absolutely loved beyond all the others, which is when he's talking about the Avengers when they go off to the Kree Skull War, and they're just like, you know, we don't know what happened. We knew they were in another galaxy fighting a war, and if they lost, we're all dead.
Right.
That was amazingly well done, and it's half the page, but it's splashed across 2 pages, so it's I guess a half splash.
So good.
And like 4 narration boxes, and that one thing, if nothing else, would have been enough to sell me on this comic.
One of my favorite things is a little thing at the end. Does anybody know who the Paperboy is? I know who the Paperboy is.
It's Billy Batson.
No, the Paperboy at the end, the one he's taking the picture with, Danny Ketch.
Oh yeah,
As Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
And
he says, let's take a picture with this normal kid.
He's like,
Danny
what's your
Ketch.
name, son? He's like, you look like a nice normal kid. And he's
You
like,
mean
yeah,
the second
in about
Ghost
20
Rider?
minutes, my head will be caught on fire. Giants. I mean, and this is one of my favorite things about it is going through again. There's all kinds of little nods. There's all kinds of shit going on in the background. Like Daredevil and Foggy Nelson are totally at Alicia Masters' art gallery.
Yeah.
They're totally checking out sculpture, and you're like, he's blind. What the fuck is he looking at? You know, it's,
I do
she's
know
also
that
born
Billy
in
Batson
sculpture.
is in here.
yeah,
somewhere.
no, you totally pointed him out.
It's just a newsboy in a red shirt.
There's so much stuff in here. I would be really interested to go find an annotated guide online somewhere.
Yeah,
to just,
exactly,
pick up all the
'cause
things because
There's
as
a
much as
bunch
I
of
was
people in that
sketching-
art gallery.
And I really like the fact that, you know, it was like all of the events happen at the right times that they should. It doesn't do the compressed Marvel Universe thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
It starts in World War II and it ends in like the late 60s or early 70s with the death of Gwen Stacy.
Which is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I had totally forgotten that happens, and it totally caught me off guard. And I was like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, because that's a powerful moment.
It just made me want to read Spider-Man Blue. And if you guys haven't read Spider-Man Blue...
I've heard that's the best of the low sale.
Well, my favorite is Hulk Gray, just because I'm such a huge Hulk fan. But Daredevil Yellow, Spider-Man Blue, and Hulk Gray are all fantastic.
They really
Long
are.
Halloween and Dark Victor.
Yeah,
both
I mean,
excellent.
those guys do such good work together. But Spider-Man Blue, if you haven't read it, is it's Peter Parker looking back at his life with Gwen Stacy. It's like him later in life when he's married to Mary Jane, and it's him kind of looking back at like.
What are you talking about? Spider-Man and Mary Jane were never married.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
On the anniversary of her death, and he's just kind of like in the attic looking through her stuff, and it's just a heart-wrenching story. But the art is phenomenal, and it is like set in the period that those were written. So it's something that I think you guys should read. And reading that end moment with Gwen Stacy like always makes me want to go read Spider-Man Blue again. So.
Yeah.
It does occur to me that the one thing about this that's a little disappointing in a sense, and I think Matt said this earlier, is it does have a sense of almost being rushed, a little bit truncated. I imagine that if this would have been done 10 years later with more acceptance of this kind of piece being done, we would have seen a much more longer and articulated piece. Some of the vignettes certainly feel like snapshots that feel rushed. And because the comparisons are obvious and true, I think that is also another place where Kingdom Come gets some breathing room on it. It has a larger format. It's got more space to be like, yes, these things are climactic and important, and here's why. Let's unpack it a little bit. Whereas this, it's like, and then the Human Torch did the thing. Oh my God, we're running. It's kind of less.
When I think about
much info in 4 issues in here.
Right.
When I think about the fact that this came out in 1993, when Marvel was failing. I mean, Marvel was bankrupt at that point, or close to it.
I think they went bankrupt in 97.
So they were approaching it. For them to do something like this, that's huge.
Which is certainly on the wings of the Image Exodus.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, when you think, it's funny because Kurt Busiek, for me, is somebody he's like Mark Waid. He's solid. You can expect good stuff from the most part. I haven't read Iron Lantern. We talk about that on episode 12. Iron Lantern was the Malcolm character.
Oh yeah,
Iron
I
Man
have all
Green
those
Lantern.
issues.
Yeah, that's why we're not going to be friends anymore after this episode.
I mean, he has a reputation, just like Wade, of having a very encyclopedic knowledge.
Yeah,
of it.
exactly.
And being reverent of the mythology, right?
Yeah.
Which is obvious in this piece.
Yeah.
Stretching
And
the
that's-
genre too in a similar way
Oh,
that
sure.
Mark Waid
Well,
does,
and this
too.
is a beautiful setup for Astro City,
Oh,
which goes on to tell very similar
with
types of
covers
stories.
by Alex Ross.
with covered by Alex Ross. And it was funny because when I picked up Kingdom Come, I was kind of like, oh, it's going to be, I was like, oh, DC's got the Marvel now. And then I read it and I was like, oh, this is a completely different story.
Yeah.
This is doing a completely different thing. And I think that might have been my first introduction to Mark Waid. And I think that's kind of...
It does a
because
very
it's
different
amusing.
thing, and I agree with Brant. It does a very different thing, I think, because it's a very different universe.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, it tries to do something similar, but it does it in a universe that is so different from the Marvel universe that you couldn't tell the same story.
Well, you're on... This is... I feel like Marvel's is going to see a play at your local playhouse, It may not have the best production values, and by that I don't mean the actual physical thing. I mean as a metaphor, people. We're doing metaphor now. It may not have the best production values, right? But it's a work of heart, and there's love in there.
Yeah.
And it's very human. And I feel like Kingdom Come is much more like a big Broadway production where there is a lot of production value and everything is very epic and like much higher in scale, and it's conveyed as such because
Kingdom Come is an opera.
yeah, exactly.
Well,
exactly.
it had way more issues and way more money and way more time.
But I mean, not even about that. It's about you really can't. The only character to me that comes close to being as iconic as like a character like Superman is Captain America, and you don't have a lot of those in the Marvel universe because they're made to be much more humanist. They're much more relatable. As much as I fucking hate to use that word because I've never crawled up a wall or swung through New York City on webs that I created the things for. Like, I can't relate to Spider-Man at all.
Well, that's not true. You can relate to him in some way.
Well,
you've
in some
done
ways.
that, but you've been short of cash. You've had your girlfriend basically walk out on you for stupid reasons. You know, I mean,
I have never, ever lost a hot, redheaded wife because I made a deal with the devil.
well, yeah.
You definitely had
Hey,
a
that's
fence
not
rip you
part of the
off on a
continuity.
gold notebook that you took out of a skyscraper that the Beyonder turned to gold because you needed to make rent, and he was the only one who would buy it.
That's true. I mean,
That's happened to all of us.
I think we can all relate to that.
Thank you for completely distorting my comment.
Uh,
but I think, but
I also remember that one time I had to fight the rhino before I could get to school and give my dissertation on Higgs
Rhino.
particles in
Rhinos.
quantum flux.
It was really ironic. It was a dissertation
Mysterio.
about rhinos.
I
It
know.
was. It was.
I just wanted to be part of the conversation. Sorry.
No, I mean, I think that there is something relatable about all heroes like Ruth Grant because they're not just, they don't always wear the mask. And,
well, I mean, that's the major conceit of the Marvel Universe, right? Is that I mean, even Steve Rogers as Captain America is one of the most iconic of those characters, right? Like he's a man out of time. He's completely like antiquated in his notions.
Right.
He gets really flustered in social situations, and in some ways, it's kind of like, wow, you deal with that by basically dressing up as this icon constantly, and you never basically take a day off. And then the few comics that talk about it, point out that like he's sitting in his apartment with his retro 40s stuff, listening to old records, because he's kind of like, those were the days. Like,
Hey, I got that reference.
and I think that that's part of the charm of this story, and I think it also is the other point that, to bring this back to the thing that you were talking about, Tobiah, about that nature of the transcendent and all those things, is that one of the central conceits of the Marvel Universe is that nothing is purely transcendent. Even Galactus has some massive flaws, as in he doesn't have critical thinking skills and occasionally needs a guy in a silver outfit made of silver.
He's
So
got
basically
no
kind of
people
go,
skills.
all right, big
It's
guy,
hard
let's
when
go
you're-
over here and not
it's
go
hard when
over
you're
here.
1,000
Well,
feet tall,
I think
you
that
know?
can be a transcendent statement even in and of itself. Galactus is this god from beyond time. And even he has a bad day sometimes.
He does.
Sometimes he wakes up in the morning and his herald tries to kill him.
Have you seen how
That's
many fucking
happened to
heralds that
everybody.
guy's been? I mean, like, he goes through them like tissue paper.
Yeah, I
He
mean,
can't be,
and I think that is
I've been
that
a herald
is
Galactus.
one of the
I mean,
most important things about the Marvel Universe is
I
that
was too right out of high school.
everyone is, in a sense, mortal. Not necessarily in that they will ever die, but that they're people. They're not these entities that are completely unrelatable to.
Well, they're ideas that represent people, whereas I feel like you can make, as much as I hate to reference it, I always think of fucking Bell's speech at the end of Kill Bill, where Superman is not, Clark Kent is not is Superman, right? It's like Bruce Wayne is Batman, right? Bruce Wayne is the suit that Batman puts on when he's not running around like beating the shit out of people. Clark Kent is the suit that Superman puts on when he's not flying around Metropolis and punching robots. Spider-Man is like Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man to go out and fight crime. Equally as much story is told about Peter Parker doing shit as Spider-Man doing shit. You get a lot more of that human element, and so it is. I think there is a little bit more element of not necessarily the mundane, but the day-to-day.
Well, they never try to separate that. They never tried to separate Spider-Man from Peter Parker. Like, very rarely. And I think the only time I can think of where Spider-Man's like, Peter Parker is dead, is in Back in Black, which they just like immediately retconned, which was like right after Civil War, where he like told Mary Jane to go away.
Oh, no, I
just,
read like 5 pages of it.
And he just, that was the only
Couldn't
time
read it.
I can remember where Spider-Man did anything remotely DC-like, where he was just like, no, that part of me is gone, that Batman has done 50,000 times.
Back in Black is, I think, I walked up to Sam the Scene and he was like, what are you reading? I was like, Back in Black. He's like, why are you reading that? then like, our friend Sam is really like, I very rarely hear him complain about, not about anything, not movies.
He
not
generally
comic
likes
books.
everything.
He generally has a pretty all-encompassing like of things. And so I was like, oh, I better put this shit back. Like, it's like Sam Lucina doesn't think it's good enough, then I shouldn't read it.
I actually liked that storyline, and I wish they had kept it going because it felt so out of character for him. That like on the heels of something so universe changing like Civil War was at the time, Like, it would have been nice to see them explore those ideas rather than go, let's just erase it all, and then we'll go back to selling Spider-Man stories where he's not married to Mary Jane. Like, they just copped out of that really quickly and didn't let it develop, and that was sad, because I was kind of interested to see where they were going with those kind of ideas.
I just read an article that was deconstructing the last thing that apparently there's a scene in One More Day where Mary Jane says something to Marvel Satan. I can't remember his name right now. Mephisto, thank you. And you don't see what it is, and then later on they say something, but they managed to like expand it through like on a digital reader or something. The digital version came out. And she's basically the one that's saying you need to do this because he'll never let you or something like that. And I was like, oh, who cares? I just spent 2 minutes telling you a story that I didn't care about just because I thought it was pertinent to the Spider-Man conversation.
Yeah,
I think I should be shot now.
Yeah, I just think that one thing that separates DC from Marvel so distinctly is what you were talking about earlier, where like Batman is the character and Bruce Wayne is the mask.
Yeah.
But in Marvel, they tend to be split.
There's
so
actually
evenly.
There's an episode of Batman Beyond where someone's trying to drive Bruce Wayne insane, and at the end, the younger Batman asked him like, how did you know it was a trick? And he was like, well, he called me Bruce Wayne. That's not what I call myself in my head.
Yeah, right?
He was like, I'm Batman.
Oh,
and Terry McGinnis was like, now I'm Batman. Old man.
Wait, I call myself Batman in my head too.
Siri calls me Batman. Like, literally, put my contact.
That's not to say that DC doesn't have humanizing stories, and I think one of the things that really led to the rise of DC in the late '90s and early aughts was that they did find a way to create stories where some of those characters became much more humanized. I think that they managed to kind of balance out that distinction between the mythological and the mundane.
Oh yeah.
And then sadly they decided to,
they got rid of the whole Justice League and replaced them with Booster Gold and Blue Beetle and.
Well, that was the '80s. I mean, that was '80s and early '90s.
That was because
that was national.
Well, no, because Booster Gold and Blue Beetle are on the JLA when Superman dies.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that was like '93.
Yeah, Superman died in '94. Yeah,
came back.
I know.
I'm saying after that. I'm saying
the Grant Morrison run.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Grant Morrison is really good, even though. Grant Morrison totally drops the ball on the whole Batman Wonder Woman romance thing. I feel like he could have explored that in a much, much better way.
Well, he didn't drop it. It got handed over to other folks because he got off of JLA. But
well, I kind of feel like we've got lost in the weeds here as far as Marvels is concerned. So are we done with that conversation?
I think we gave it a glowing recommendation as far as these things go.
I would recommend it to some people.
I just rubbed a little shit on that.
Yeah. That's fine. I mean, that's cool. This is kind of your place in the group.
Yeah.
Shit is like,
I really can't.
I have lent Tobiah in the last couple of weeks. I've lent him easily 5 comic books, and every time he finishes it, I'm like, "What did you think?" He's like, "I don't like it."
No, I said it's good, but I have misgivings.
It's like the other day it was like we were talking about Emperor Joker, and he's like, "What do you think?" And I'm like, "You didn't like it." And he's like, "Do you know why?" I'm like, It was something about it that you didn't like. It was just.
I believe that the first 2 words out of my mouth were Jeff and Loeb.
He's awesome. Was the rest of your sentence?
No,
right?
not at all.
Damn.
It's we have problems with our ideologies. I think that he pulls off Emperor Joker brilliantly.
I think that Emperor Joker is a good idea that was horrendously executed.
Yeah, and I believe the opposite of that, except the excellent idea part.
Joe, I love you because you're so comfortable with being wrong.
I am right, and I can prove it mathematically, and none of you motherfuckers can do that.
That's a lie.
I don't want to stick around for that, so let's skip that part of the part. I'm going to just fast forward, edit out the part where Joe talks about math.
Not talking about math.
All right, we're back. Thanks for skipping that part. Let's
Anyways,
go to
I will start
recommendations.
talking about puppet sodomy. I swear to God, I will.
I would much rather listen to 1,000 hours of you talking about puppet sodomy
I will
than
destroy
4
this
minutes
podcast.
of you talking
Puppets
about
fucking everywhere.
No.
Everywhere.
All right, let's do recommendations.
We need to make sure that nobody's parents can listen to this. That's why I have to talk about it.
Brant,
My
where do you
mom's the
rank?
only one that listens to this.
Brant, save us from this conversation.
I
Tell
think
us
it's
what you
important that we continue to celebrate Kurt Busiek's encyclopedic knowledge of comics. And so I propose that we read Avengers Forever next.
I would love to read Avengers.
Which I think is actually really an excellent counterpoint to Marvel's. It's kind of, let's get back to the 4-color comics, Avengers across time assemble to fight the
Let's team
Master
up
of Time
with Kang to
himself
fight
against
Kang with Kang.
That's right. Like, I think it's in my mind, it's a fascinating read for a bunch of different reasons. It's got some fantastic mythological elements. If you're into the Marvel Universe, it's got great characterization and plot points. If you're not into the super great history of the Marvel Universe, it's drawn fantastically well. It's really fun, and it's a great read.
Well, and it stars a guy whose name is the sound a frying pan makes when you hit somebody with it, which... I love Kang. He's like 8 different people in the Marvel Universe.
I read the first chapter of Avengers Forever when Brant and I were roommates 5 years ago, and I fell asleep on the couch, and I never finished it. So maybe this is the opportunity for me to correct a mistake I made.
It's like a weird roundabout slap against it. I fell asleep reading it once. I guess maybe I should finish it now.
Kang is literally fucking everywhere in the Marvel Universe. He's Immortalist. He's Ramakon, isn't he?
He's
Ramatut.
3 people.
Ramatut. He's Ramatut.
Kang,
Ramakon is...
Unless you count each iteration of Kang as a different Kang.
Yeah,
Well,
there's
he's he poses as different people.
Isn't he also like
I don't wanna
Iron
spoil
Lad?
Oh yeah, he is also
Iron
Iron
Lad.
Lad. So
Okay,
he's
I was
4
gonna say,
different
I don't
people.
want to spoil their Young Avengers, but Kang is one of those characters.
Yeah, but
It's
that's
just like...
a young Kang.
Right.
I feel like Kang would be the kind... You'd be like, wait, what Kang are you? Have we done that thing yet? What thing? Oh, shit. Okay, forget I said anything about... We don't do that thing. That
No,
doesn't
see, the
happen.
fantastic thing about Kang as a character is he's the one who always shows up and is like, attention Avengers, I'm about to do X, Y, and Z. And it's the Avengers who have to sit there and be like,
Wait a
crap,
minute.
is this one we've run into before or not? Like, Kang doesn't have any self-assuredness problems about whether or not he's there to kick ass.
Right,
It's
that's
the
true.
Avengers who have to kind of always stall and be like,
Like,
do we need to go talk to another Kang about this, or should we deal with this ourselves?
I'm here to blow up the Hoover Dam. Kang, you did that last week. Oh, shit. Okay, hold on. I'll be back.
No, see, that's what I'm saying. Kang doesn't have that problem. Kang has the technology and the resources to be like, I know what the last 3 Kangs did. That stuff was stupid. I'm going to do this now. Hey, Tony Stark, I brought weapons that you created from the future, and I'm going to blow you up with it unless you do what I want. Aw, damn.
Tony
Yeah, that's
Stark's
right.
like, I'm going to cut off my hands and never make those weapons. I'm going to make Iron Hands, and they'll call me Iron Hand Man.
Iron Hand Man. That's the comic I want to read.
That's it.
Joe, are you recommending Iron Hand Man? this
I'm
week?
recommending. It's from the future. I'm going to get it from Kang later.
Yeah.
It's
Pharos Manos.
Varos Manos Los Manos. No,
Something.
Iron Hands of Hands. Iron Hands of Hands.
All right.
All right,
Joe, what are you
do
bringing?
I'm going to go last.
What?
Yeah.
You don't get
just
to
go.
decide.
I brought King City because you bastards didn't vote for it last
All
time.
right, then pitch it.
Okay,
What's it
I'm
about?
not. It's the best thing you'll read.
Okay,
Ever.
cool. That's a good pitch. I
King
wonder why we
City,
didn't pick it last time.
It's Brandon Graham. It's I think it's one of the first.
I
big things. He
believe
did it
that
for
I
Tokyo
described
Pop.
it as Transmetropolitan meets
Meets
Scott Pilgrim.
Yes, which a
With
description
cats.
that caused our friend Eric to groan, which brought me some joy because he does it really well. But it's great. It's Brandon Graham, who we love, and it's about a spy that's a cat master.
You used we so liberally.
Well, we agreed that we need to give him sandwiches, so that implies some general affection.
I never agreed to give him sandwiches. I'm
Who are
saying
we
that
giving
the
sandwiches
application
to?
of we is
To Brandon
inappropriate
Graham.
in this entire group.
I told on the episode. I said give him a sandwich.
Oh no, we do. I mean, you can distance
If he's
yourself,
hungry,
but we love
I give
him.
him one all the time.
Well,
We love him. We can ostracize you.
I'm not up to snuff on Brandon Graham, so I don't know if he's worthy of my sandwiches
Well,
or
we
not.
did
need to
Prophet.
correct that. He
Yeah,
did
you
Prophet.
should read
Prophet.
Prophet. We read that on the show. It was good. Aren't you
But
listening to the old episodes and playing along?
it's
Yeah.
it's a guy that is a spy, and he's called the Cat Master, which basically means that he has a cat that he can inject with a special serum that makes the cat be anything he wants it to be.
And the cat is pretty cool.
And the cat is pretty fucking cool. And it also has a drug in it that turns you to chalk, and you end up doing yourself.
And there's aliens and kung fu hotties and
all kinds of
mutants
great
and kung fu battles, and it's awesome.
It's just good. I really feel like I found out about Brandon Graham somewhere weird, and I went and I bought this because it was cheap, and it was done by Tokyo Pop, and then Image reprinted it. And it's really nice black and white edition, and there's like nothing disappointing in there. It doesn't have an ending yet, but.
That's kind
Or
of
the way it
disappointing.
ends is kind of open. It ends in an open way.
It ends in a very ambiguous way.
But I think that's fine because I don't think it detracts from the story at all.
For you.
Whatever.
I only read books with endings.
That's right.
Shield.
So what do you got,
Yeah, I
Cade?
didn't read it.
I brought a book that's making Tobiah give me the stink eye.
Yeah, I've been giving you a look all episode.
Mark Miller's.
Millar.
I brought The Ultimates by Mark Millar and Brian Hitch, and while I do agree with many of Tobiah's misgivings about Mark Millar, I think that everybody should give it a shot, especially if you like the Avengers.
I will admit, grudgingly, that The Ultimates is one of Millar's more tolerable works.
Wow. Ringing endorsement.
That's pretty good. This might be my favorite thing that he wrote. I don't hate Mark Millar at all. I think I enjoyed Civil War. I think this book is great, and I liked the Ultimate Fantastic Four that he started writing as well. So I was a huge fan of the Ultimate Universe when it launched. I love Ultimate Spider-Man to death. I think that book is amazing. So.
Well, it wasn't written by Mark Millar.
No, it wasn't. But I think that this
Brian Michael Bendis,
adds
who
a
is
lot.
actually really good on that comic.
I think this adds a lot to that universe, and I enjoyed it for what it is.
Yeah, I'm like 70-30 on the Ultimates. Like, I actually appreciate to a certain extent the kind of gritty realness that Millar is trying to bring to this aspect of the Ultimate Universe. I think he makes some commentary that getting people together like this in this form would probably not be nearly as pretty or easy as you think it would be. It's not just like, hello everybody, we're the super friends. It's more like, wow, you could do business in a way that I don't like, and I guess we'll have to work together. That said, Hitch kind of accentuates some of the more like not so great parts about Millar's personality in a way that some, I guess what I'm saying is sensitive readers beware. Like, the Avengers history, even in normal canon, has some pretty intense emotional issues as far as how some of those characters interact, and the Ultimates only amplifies that in a way that can be kind of distressing if you're sensitive about, say, people beating their wife, or
That's what I was gonna say. This is
things
the
like
one.
that.
Is this the one where
Yes.
what's his face? Hank
Yes.
comes out and he's under the covers and he's this big and he's like, "Now it's your turn, Jan," or whatever. That seems like I read that the other day, and I know it's from the Ultimates.
I don't know about that part.
It may not be.
That might be later.
It might be later in the Ultimates. Maybe it's Ultimates too. I don't know.
Yeah, but there's definitely foreshadowing to something. I mean, to that. There's definitely.
Well, they have their actual first fight in that. The
Yeah.
first thing, I believe. I mean, I'm pretty sure Hank lays her out.
Yeah, that's like the very first thing that he does. Is beat the
Spoilers.
shit out of her.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. Hank Pym is an abusive asshole. Oh, wait. He's always been one.
Yeah.
Which is funny because in the Marvel Universe, he did that once when they were trying to turn him into a supervillain and then decided it was a bad idea. And ever since then, he's been the wife beater.
That's
Well,
not
it's just
quite
like-
true.
Yeah.
They
You
changed
slap
it to
your
the...
wife around
If
once.
we read Avengers Forever, we could explore this a little more, because actually there was an entire period of time where he was running around as the Yellow Jacket persona, and he was pretty much King Douchebag the entire time.
Right, they were turning him into a villain.
He
built an evil robot that he was going to save the day from, and it went rogue, and he couldn't stop it, and he beat his wife, and he was crazy, and a douchebag. They were totally setting him up to be a supervillain.
maybe.
Also, that's
And then, like, in the last minute, they backed away.
that's
from it.
like saying that I only murdered someone that one time, but the rest of my life that was awesome.
Well,
Yeah, but
it
that
wasn't,
guy's
it wasn't even
totally-
like he was a wife beater for like a period.
No,
it was
I mean, like,
one punch.
One time is still like,
but
I
I
don't know,
think-
bad
And
enough
like
to
I don't
color
know,
that
I don't want to
character.
sound like I'm excusing domestic abuse. I just kind of feel like people have been lambasting his character for a poor decision on editorial's part.
Can we lambaste him for being a lame fucking character?
Well,
If
sure,
that's
we
what
can
I
do
have to do.
first of all, I challenge that assertion. If you read some of Avengers Academy
I mean-
and other things
I
lately,
mean,
he's
Yellow
actually a
Jacket.
very cool fucking character. But second of all, I think that you're right. I think the problem is purely an editorial and writing thing, which is that the Yellow Jacket period actually helped define Hank Pym as a character in the Marvel Universe, where he was always kind of like boring template super scientist dude. You know, it was like his biggest achievement was like, I made Pym particles. And it's like, that's great, Hank. You know, that's fantastic. Thanks. But it's like when you have a universe with Reed Richards and Tony Stark and all that stuff, it's kind of like, I'm a generic super scientist guy that turns into Giant Man. But then they did the Yellow Jacket thing and a couple of other things. And so there was this defining thing. And one of it is that Hank Pym is one of the smartest men in the world. But unlike some of the other folks, he has a really hard time keeping his crap together. So I think what's trying to be done is they're trying to be like, hey, Hank's unstable, that's the problem, i.e., remember when he was Yellow Jacket, but they just kind of shorthand it and be like, remember that time he beat his wife? It's like, no, they're really,
the
they're
problem
really
is that
mean
Mark
that entire...
Millar writes everyone like an asshole, and so when he's trying to make Hank Pym an asshole, he makes him a super big asshole.
I don't even know what Yellow
He
Jacket could
definitely
do.
does not write every character as an asshole, or that
I'm
books would be
pretty
so
sure he did.
boring.
Yeah.
Because
No.
there is not... There's point and counterpoint in Civil War. There's not one character being an asshole.
Yep.
Yes, someone says an asshole thing to someone else, but that happens, you know? So I think that... I don't know. I think that yes, sometimes he says like asshole stuff, but I don't know. I think that it doesn't mean he writes every character as an asshole.
Tobiah wears Jeff Johns filtered glasses calibrated for Mark Millar's frequency. I'm sorry.
Something like that.
Joe hates Jeff Johns. Tobiah hates Mark Millar.
I want to say something about that because I've been listening to these podcasts as we put them up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually preface my statements at one point by saying I'm an asshole when I say this, and I'm overly opinionated about things. And I want to say something about Jeff Johns. I don't hate Jeff Johns as a person. I hate what he's done to the characters I love, right? I'm sure I have a great deal of respect for him because he works in the industry and he actually has written some well-crafted stories. But not only that, he has to work in circumstances that are probably not ideal for what he wants to do. So having said that, fuck Jeff Johns.
Yeah,
And please withdraw your lawsuit from our podcast.
And I wouldn't say that I hate Mark Millar as a person either. If I met him, I'd be very polite to him, as you should be polite to people. I don't think he's a good writer, and I would tell him to his face, dude, I don't think that you write comic books well. I'm sorry if you don't like that opinion, but that's
I would
how
say that to Rob Liefeld. He was at Comic-Con he was in Emerald City a few years ago, and I wanted to say it to him.
Well, he was there, but he didn't show up for any of the signings because he's a big...
Oh, I saw him there.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
He also just made all of his fans, which I didn't even know there were Rob Liefeld fans, but he made all of them wait like extra 4 hours for him to show up for a signing.
he owns Conan's sword.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, you don't have to be on time for things.
Yeah.
It's true. It's very true.
Is that one of its imported powers? Purported powers?
Yeah.
One thing
You don't have to be on time.
One thing I did want to note, we were talking about the Hank Pym character, and I think part of the whole wife beating thing, a negative character development is still character development.
Mm-hmm.
There is a reason for it. It has a purpose in the story.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I agree. I think I can't remember which Ultimates I've read. I'm not unwilling to read it again. I just don't like the way Mark Millar writes.
Well, and if anything, Millar contextualizes it better than it I mean, it really did kind of come out of nowhere, as far as I recall, in the normal universe, especially considering the tone of the comics at the time. It feels more appropriate for the tone of the Ultimate universe.
Oh, absolutely.
And and that's what I was saying. I completely agree. I think that it is meant to be a specific reflection of an entire issue that Hank Pym has, and
Well, isn't part of the reason that the Ultimates universe is like that is because Millar was writing the Ultimates and Ultimate X-Men and Ultimate Fantastic Four?
no, he didn't write Ultimate Fantastic Four. He wrote Marvel Knights 4.
Did he?
Yeah.
I thought he was there for. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I thought he wrote some of...
He might have read some of that,
Okay,
but there were more
Wait,
than
did
it
he
was more than
write-
Mark Millar. I mean,
No, it was
So
more
the
than him, but
whole-
he was there for a lot of the early stuff, and
Yeah.
he had a hand in defining what that
He-
universe was like.
He and Bendis were definitely like some of the bigger writers there. Warren Ellis wrote Ultimate Fantastic Four for a while as
right.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he wrote that Ultimate Galactus story that was its
Right.
own
Yeah.
thing.
He wrote.
Ultimate-
Well, there's three
Ultimate
different pieces to
Nightmare,
it too.
yeah,
Ultimate
Ultimate
Nightmare,
Nightmare.
Ultimate Vision, or whatever that one was from. Yeah.
That was a different one. I thought there was like the Ultimate Vision was another miniseries too.
Right. But I think
And then, I mean, there were a lot of people in there shaping the Ultimate Universe. I mean, this also comes on the tail. Like, Orson Scott Card had already written that really
Started
weird
Ultimate Iron Man.
Ultimate Iron Man story that, like, really colors the character in Ultimates in a way that I thought was, like, oh, well, he had to deal with this thing that another writer had already written. That's unfortunate. I would have loved to have seen what he had done had there been no pretext for that.
Right.
Because most of the characters in that book, there was no Ultimate Hulk yet. There was no Ultimate Captain America yet. There was no Ultimate Hank Pym yet.
Right.
So he got to really shape those characters. but Ultimate Iron Man had already been
defined.
Whatever happened to Ultimate Triathlon? That's what I want to know.
Everyone wants to know where.
Is that ever a thing? I hope not.
No.
I hope so. I really
You mean the
hope so.
greatest Avenger of all time?
He is.
Yeah.
He is. He's in Civil War.
Yeah.
It's true.
So
But
my
everybody's in
nomination
Civil War.
for next episode is Atomic Robo, and I'm going to fuck up at least one of these names, by Brian Clevenger and Scott Wegener.
That's right.
Wegner? I don't know.
There's like 3 E's in there. Anyway, it's by the guy who did 8-Bit Theater for a very, very long time, if you're at all familiar with that. And it's about an atomic robot. Go figure. Built by Nikolai Tesla, fights Nazis in World War II, gets granted his basically human rights. He becomes a U.S. citizen. Founds a corporation called Tesladyne and hires a bunch of action scientists and has crazy fucking adventures where he fights Nazi robots and giant ants and a mobile pyramid in Egypt that shoots lasers and a guy called Dr. Dinosaur.
Well, who doesn't show up till later volume?
Well, he's in like
3 or 4.
free comic book day issues where he was introduced. But in any case, it's fun, it's cleverly written. It gets compared to Hellboy a lot because there are some kind of superficial similarities, but it's really kind of
They're more than
different.
superficial, but
And
the tone is very different.
Yeah, it is very different tonally.
And-
It's a lot of fun and a lot of hitting things until they break.
In the same way that the book I brought, King City, is a weird fusion of 2 things you wouldn't think go together, I always think of Atomic Robo as Buckaroo Banzai meets Hellboy.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of witty rejoinders.
Yeah.
Brian Clevenger is a very clever writer.
See, I always just think of Hellboy with Benny Hill music in the background, and I kind of think of
That's good.
I think it really reminds me, it has that Buckaroo Banzai feel where it's like, we're multi-talented, we're not just scientists, we're kung fu scientists, we have our black belts and our PhD.
And the first volume is titled Atomic Robo and the Fightin' Scientists of Tesladyne. Oh, and later he also fights, what's his name? The scientist guy who invented the light bulb, whose name escapes me. Edison. He fights Edison's
That
guy.
one guy, patent thief.
I have a problem with forgetting Edison.
I think we all should forget Edison.
He was a fantastic patent thief and deserves to be rewarded for his effort.
I think
By being made a villain in a good comic book.
There you
go. I actually like the villain portrayal of Edison in Five Fists of Science better.
Yeah.
Which is another Tesla versus Edison story.
With written by Matt Fraction.
Matt Fraction,
who's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And it's great. Mark
thought it was
Twain
okay.
and Tesla. Well, I mean, we've established that you hate all things.
I
that
don't
are
hate
good.
it. I don't hate it. I think it's good. It's just not like it's not as good as Atomic Robo.
It's so different. I feel like that's hard to compare.
Like I read it and I was like, okay, that's a thing.
Are you
That was good.
Skeletor?
I'm not Skeletor.
I think you might be Skeletor.
I might be the blue He-Man guy. Pretendor?
A Pretendor? Was he
What
the
if
guy
the-
with like 3 faces?
No, that was Triface.
Triface.
Yeah.
What a clever name!
Hello. Cleverness in He-Man, not exactly.
I'm glad I didn't watch that show.
You know, they rebooted it.
Twice.
When
course
they
they did.
rebooted it once, then when they rebooted Transformers, and I was really excited for the Transformers, and I didn't care about the He-Man, and then I watched them, and the Transformers reboot was awful, and the He-Man reboot was awesome. I'm like, why wasn't this a thing when I was a kid?
The one that I remember is He-Man was before my generation, but during my generation they did He-Man like in the future, and
I don't remember that.
and like no one remembers this, and I feel like it's
Was
a
it a
thing that I
fever
made
dream,
up, but
maybe?
it's no, like I really feel like they rebooted He-Man in the far-flung future as like a sci-fi show.
Oh no, that's Thundar the Barbarian.
No.
Or
Thundar
Galtar.
was like way
Dude,
before.
Galtar and the Golden Lance is pimp.
I love Thundar.
I'm a big
Barbarian.
Thundar fan.
That was like
Yeah,
that was
Thundar's
like
old Hanna-Barbera, old
That's
60s,
like
That's true,
early
that's
70s.
it's
true.
like when the Herculoids.
That's
and
right.
Oh,
that
yeah.
era.
Except
Yeah.
it was 1,000 times better than the Hercules.
Well, yeah, it's Thundar the Barbarian. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Ookla.
Oh,
To me, Ookla. Ariel, Ookla. Yeah.
All right, we're switching the theme of this podcast. We're going to start talking about old cartoons.
Old cartoons.
That's the end. We can.
That's our next bonus episode.
Yeah.
Right there.
I
Awesome
thought
cartoons.
We already have our next bonus episode.
Do we?
We have our next 3.
Well, we've got a couple.
I haven't heard about any of these. Veto
We
them
don't
all.
tell
I wanna
you
talk
about these
cartoons.
things. You don't need to worry yourself about these.
All right. I'm gonna give my recommendation yet.
Yeah, I think we lost Matt.
We did. We lost Matt, and I had to go home. He said that he would rather be on part of the episode than to just skip the whole thing, but he had to leave early. I was like, well, maybe we'll get you in for recommendations, but we've talked for
He could have
like
told us.
5
We could have
hours.
pitched it.
And we could have let him go. We could have let him go
think about
first.
it.
That's true.
Anyway, it's his
Anyway.
loss.
So the book that I picked is a book that is not yet out, so I feel like I'm just going to cause problems with it, but it's a book that I want to talk about. So, it was a Kickstarter book that I funded. It's written by Mark Andrew Smith and art by James Stoke, who wrote and drew Orkstain, so another book that I really enjoy. This book's called Sullivan Sluggers. It's essentially a horror graphic novel in very cheesy slasher, zombie movie, monster movie fashion. There's they are a baseball team comprised of old, great players, and they now go on the road on a bus together to these little small farm league teams to play against them, to be like, you can play against the greats that you used to watch. And so like the hometown will pay for this touring band of retired, essentially baseball pros to come and play. And there's some young kids on the team who are trying to, like, you know, make their waves in the baseball world and also learn from these greats, but they just kind of find out that the greats are all kind of old, drunk, you know, and washed up people and don't really have much of a life outside of baseball. So that's probably why they spend their whole time on the road in a bus playing baseball all the time. Anyway, they end up in a town where there's a lot of warning signs that are like, don't go into the town, but they're like, whatever, let's go in anyway. And they go into this town, and the monsters appear, and it becomes a survival horror slasher, kill all the monsters before they kill you, let's escape kind of book. It's a lot of fun. It reads super fast, and there are some absolute amazing splash pages in this book. I have the oversized hardcover of it, and it really benefits the art to have the giant size. But there are just like some awesome splash pages that I'm now showing
That is a really cool splash
the
page.
the hosts. But you guys can't see this. But
Are
you should
there some
definitely go.
preview images on the Kickstarter page?
There should be some on the Kickstarter page. There's also, I believe, the Comixology digital copies have been released, so you might be able to get it digitally before it comes out in hardback.
Well, we can probably throw a link into the show
Yeah,
notes,
and
so
the
check
paperback,
the comments.
The paperback should be coming out soon at some point. It's solicited on Amazon, so hopefully it's coming out soon. So it's something I kind of wanted to preview for everyone. But the art is just phenomenal. I love James Stokes so much. Like, I just think that his art is so imaginative and just different, and his monsters are just so interesting to look at. It's really reminiscent of stuff he did in Orkstain and Wonton Soup. The one downside of this book, I would say, is that he doesn't color his own work, so it's not quite as dramatic as it is when he colors it himself in Orkstain.
Right.
But
What's
I think
that title?
In
No,
this,
what you got?
Sullivan Sluggers.
Sullivan Sluggers.
Sullivan's Sluggers.
Sullivan Sluggers.
Yeah, Sullivan is the coach who used to be like an old baseball legend. So yeah, and that's my pick. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun.
Okay.
All right.
So, Brant, what are you voting for?
Sullivan Sluggers.
I'm gonna vote for Avengers Forever.
King City.
I'm also going to vote for King City.
Oh, man, guys, this means that I have to tiebreak again. I really wanted to read Avengers Forever. I'm sure that I'll just borrow it at some point. So, wait, so I have to vote for something to make it not a tie. So I'll just.
So what you're saying
so I'll
is-
vote for King
No, if
City.
you vote for Avengers Forever, you'll force the tie, won't you?
If you
I'll
vote for
force the
anything,
tie.
if you vote for anything except King City or Atomic
City
Robo,
wins.
Right.
you can vote for Atomic Robo and then King City would win by default.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's basically the situation I'm in. It's like you either force a tie, which we don't really know how to break right now.
We could flip a coin.
Well, if we have a tie, then that should release those of us who can't normally vote for our own books to vote for our own books.
Well, then that doesn't really fix the tie, though.
Oh yeah,
I think
because
what's
then
going
Joe
on
will
is-
Joe would then
vote for King City.
Yeah.
So, I guess I'll vote for King City, and we can read that. It's not that I don't want to read King City; I definitely do, and I've been meaning to borrow it from Joe for a long time. So,
We'll come up with a tiebreaker for the next time.
yeah,
this
we'll have to
happens.
kind of figure something out. But yeah, I'll definitely want to read Avengers Forever as well. I love
Well, yeah, I
Avengers,
mean,
and love Kang.
I've since last podcast, I've read Top 10 and Court of Owls, both of which Top 10 easily my
My
favorite work by Alan Moore.
Me
Hands
too.
down.
Me too.
Hands down. I'm looking forward to
Did you
reading
read Smacks?
Smacks.
Do you want to borrow that?
Well, your volume might be a little bit better because I have the digital version, so it's a little
that's
smaller.
better.
So.
It's a hardcover and it's beautiful.
But Court of Owls also excellent, surprisingly so. So
some good stuff.
I mean, I'll read Avengers forever.
Matt, I know what Matt was going to recommend, so I can just kind of tease it for you. Was Animal Man from the New 52.
Nice. I'd like to read that.
Everyone should go check that out. I read the first couple issues and it didn't really catch me, but Matt said stick with it because it really picks up after issue 3.
Actually,
Right.
I've been thinking about recommending the Morrison Animal Man.
Oh yeah, I love more than the rest of it. The first volume where it's just him writing a traditional superhero story.
Oh no, you got to read it to the end of it.
Oh, of course, I love all
That's
of
the
that.
good part.
But I
we like
the
a
first
lot
part the
more
best.
as a we also like the Invisibles, which is far removed from fucking superhero story as you can get.
Yeah, Mr. I hate everything that you like.
Hey, we can agree on that.
I also
We
want
can
to
agree on
apologize for my muffled coughing in the background. I'm coming back from a nasty plague. So.
I do want to note that Avengers Forever was on my list of things that I wanted to recommend. And as always, you should read all of the books we recommend.
You should, and I think that
Absolutely.
Avengers Forever definitely needs to be on the list of things that get recommended a second time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because
As
that's
evidenced by
great.
the success of King City. It failed before, but this time it got through.
Yeah.
I would like to see you bring Avengers Forever again in the future.
Well, maybe I'll bring it again.
Let's all bring it. Let's
all
just
bring
agree
it.
to all bring it. Then
I'll
we'll be
bring it.
like, I'm gonna vote for Avengers Forever.
You can't though because you brought it.
I'm gonna vote for
No one
your-
can vote for anything.
Oh shit! Oh no!
Man, you just want to break this voting system
know.
in half.
I do.
We need a
It's overly
constitution
complicated.
for this podcast to resolve this shit.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, and we will catch you in 2 weeks when we read King City.
When we read King City, fucking
Alright.
sodomy.
Thanks,
See ya.
guys. Bye.
Good night.